So hello and welcome to everyone. It's 2:00, so I think we'll kick off today's TAFE Talks. I'd like to warmly welcome everyone to today's TAFE Talks on the topic of cybersecurity, building capability and responding to risk. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands upon which we meet across Australia and pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples with us today. I'm coming to you today from Melbourne, which is the land of the Wurundjeri people. So to begin today's session, I'd really like to acknowledge the support of Technology One. We have Peter Nicolatatis here with us today, and he is the Industry General Manager for Education at Technology One. We're extremely grateful to Peter and to Technology One for their support to TDA. They are a long-standing corporate affiliate, and it's thanks to them that we're able to run these TAFE Talk sessions free of charge for our members. So thank you, Peter, and thank you, Technology One. For today's session, we'll be hearing from Patrick Kidd, who is the CEO of the Digital Skills Organisation, or the DSO, and he's joined by his colleague, Dr. Jithani Nair, who is the Director of Digital Skills and Concepts at the DSO. Patrick and Jithani will be talking about the Digital Upskilling Challenge and the DSO response. We'll also be joined by Fiona Mitchell, who is the Director of Industry Engagement at the Canberra Institute of Technology. Fiona will outline the approach CIT is taking through the Canberra Cyber Hub, which is an innovative pilot program recently launched in Canberra to solve the cyber skills shortage. Following their presentations, we'll hear from Peter Nicolatatis from Technology One, who'll share his insights on how education institutions can better manage their cyber security threats. So at the end of the session, we'll allow some time for a question and answer session with our audience. So if you have any questions for today's speakers, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box. You can see the button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll come back to them after we've heard from our speakers. So without further ado, I would like to invite Patrick Kidd to open the discussions and set the scene for the work that the DSO is doing on cybersecurity. So over to you, Patrick.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lyndall, very much. And I'm assuming that people can hear me. I also absolutely just want to recognise Gathani, who's helping me today. I can sort of like talk about generalities and the sort of the broader piece, but when we get into some of the sort of the detail that I think an audience like this deserves, you know, Gathani, there is no better expert than Gathani in terms of bringing this to life, and I think thinking of it through the lens of the training providers. So I'm really pleased that Gathani was able to come and join this particular session. And I think it's also timely. We're doing a bunch of work in Canberra with the ACT Cyber Hub project, which is around trying to find more effective ways of upskilling people in this highly important area. I'd also like to call out sort of like TDA and Jenny really for all the help that she's giving us, because I think I've come to this really a little bit late in my own sort of journey as the CEO of the DSO, you know, but the need for us to engage properly with you, the training providers, is absolutely fundamental if we're going to drive change in this sector. So the idea of co-design and real co-design to work together to find better ways of doing things, that's our opportunity. And what I sense when I'm talking in the areas that I have the privilege of doing so, sort of federal government, state government sort of levels, there's a real sense of the need to drive change in this space, and particularly in the digital space. And I think people just need to be shown what it is they need to do. And I think they'll then try and help us to sort of get it done. But the challenge in this sector is that there are a host of different fragmented initiatives. Nothing pulls it together. And so therefore, when you're trying to work out what the policy adjustments might be, the funding responses that are going to be so important, no one really knows what the answer is. And so I think our obligation, as we're all thinking about this together, is like, what are the 3 or 4 things that we can actually do that will make a difference? And if we can identify them and then communicate them in simple and clear language, then maybe there's a real chance of actually making some of the adjustments that we all know are necessary. So into cybersecurity, I'll talk to a couple of slides and then hand across to Gathani, and we'll sort of box and cox. So really just looking at the sort of the challenge, and we have presented a slide like this before, but it wasn't focused on sort of the digital, on the cyber piece directly. So for those of you who've heard it before, apologies, but it's sometimes good to hear these things a couple of times. You know, we know in this space that there is a massive shortfall of digital talent in terms of people who are able to undertake professional roles in the digital space. There are different numbers that are out there, but very much the one that we've been using for some time now is 60,000 people a year. And we know that the current system, be it higher education and vet, is generating less than 10,000 people a year. So we have a massive gap in terms of what it is we need to do. The gap doesn't really even begin to get to the reality of it, though, in terms of the numbers of people that sit right across our economy who need to have digital skills to be able to power the businesses that they're involved with. So be it digital professionals or digital users of technology, we have a significant gap in terms of the people that we are placing into our economy that have the skills that are necessary to drive the change that is required. And this has a real impact on our economy. You know, at the end of the day, skills are not skills on their own. Skills are things that power processes. They enable businesses to work better, to sell more, to create more. And if we don't have a really strong lens on this idea of productivity and improving that productivity through skills, we won't make the step changes that we need. And if we hear the narrative that's coming through the election, it's all about the fact that we have to increase our productivity if we're going to get through the problems that we're currently facing. So skills are important, but they're not important in their own right. They're important because they enable us to do things. And I think so often in the digital space, we fail to communicate the impact of the skills. We talk too much about the technology skills themselves. So all the time, I'm trying to get to sort of language that will help small, medium, and large scale organizations understand the value of investing in these areas. We know that the pace of change in this sector is the ongoing challenge. It's shifting and changing all of the time, and yet we have a training package approach that doesn't keep pace with that change. So it's a real challenge for you to be able to train what employers want you to train and what they value. So there's a bunch of work that we need to do there. In terms of the cyber perspective, at the end of the day, we got sort of a supply versus demand shortage. In terms of 26,500 cybersecurity professionals against an estimation in terms of the numbers required of 135,000. So a real gap. You can see the behemoth of government trying to employ everybody in what they do, which of course then leads to other challenges that exist outside of that. And again, mindful of the fact that from a cyber perspective, you know, this is about every business, isn't it? It's about 1.4 million sole traders. It's about 99% of businesses that employ less than 20 people, that employs 68% of the economy. So it's a much, much bigger problem than just those cyber professionals. So it's a really important part of where we're trying to get to. So there's a real gap, there's a real need. So why are we in this place? There's a lack of awareness about the opportunities that exist in the sector. So that awareness for me is on two fronts. Employers who don't know that they need people with the right cybersecurity skills that we're talking about, and learners that aren't identifying that actually there is a cybersecurity pathway that they could be thinking about. You know, we have to shift our communication about opportunity so that it becomes more than people who just do STEM at school. It's actually open and available to everybody if they have the right aptitude, the right attitude to be able to undertake those roles. And what's so exciting about the cyber project is that it's focused upon people who are looking to shift and change their careers. So all the skills that they've learned can be picked up and then translated into a new career, which has new skills which underpin it. We have, you know, another reason why we're in this place, and we've got all of these fragmented initiatives that are being rolled out in different states across the nation, 50 different digital projects in government alone, but none of it is being delivered at scale, and none of it is therefore getting to impact. So how do we do something that has scale, has impact, and can be used to really drive change in the sector. And when we think about the cyber project that Gathani and team will talk about later on, yes, it's about cyber, but it's also about something much bigger than that. It's about trying to really think and talk differently about how we deliver digital training within the sector that we're talking about. It's like digital guacamole, isn't it? It's like there's a million different initiatives, little pots of money that are out there from state government or federal government. My God, you know, we can do so much better, but we have to get to scale, and therefore we have to communicate together about what those challenges are. We see, you know, within Australia, of course, is that there's a lack of a talent pool. And so as a consequence of the lack of that talent pool, we're not reaching out to people at various points in time to show that actually these careers are attainable for them, they are achievable. So lots of stuff that we need to do there. Some statistics that I think are interesting. 45% of students at school are not taught at school about digital skills. 70% of initiatives that are conducted by companies never work at any scale. 74% of the digital workforce is male. 7% of people who don't have technology skills are able to easily find a match for their skills in technical occupations. So we're automatically consigning people to a particular box which they can't break out of. So we have to think differently about talent, differently about how to open up and make pathways accessible to people so that they can come along and try these new ways of working. So there's like lots to be done. The scale of the challenge, when you think about it from across the sector, and particularly with respect to cyber, which affects every company of any size, is massive. But we do need to start somewhere. And so I think what's exciting about some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today is that it's a real attempt to try and grip the problem in a way that can then be scaled across other elements of the sector. I now want Gathani, please, to talk about sort of what you're currently doing in the sector, sort of help sort of bring that bit to life before we sort of close out. G.
Thank you, PK. That was basically set the scene. I've actually went through and looked at two major things that when I was in TAFE New South Wales as well, with the TAFE Cyber Consortium, how well that particular consortium has placed TAFE to deliver cybersecurity training. And what we need to do to scale it. So just to have a look, the two main qualifications, I know that with the recent training package change, we have quite a lot of, we have the cybersecurity specialization in there, we have the cybersecurity skill sets and all that we can work with as well. But just to see since 2017, where TAFE actually, with the leadership of Box Hill, and subsequently the TAFE Cyber with the sponsorship of AusCyber, that actually implemented Certificate 4 in cybersecurity and Advanced Diploma in cybersecurity in number of states in Australia. And as you can see, if you look at the numbers, enrollment numbers, there is an encouraging upward enrollment, and I was very pleasing when I looked at New South Wales enrollment numbers as well. That's a personal thing, when it's still, you look at the enrollments and then the completions, which is really when it comes to completions, that's something that we need to look for as well, without going into details about why the completions are this way. Just to go, when we talk to the employers, how many people are we injecting into the talent pipeline, skilled talent pipeline? There's an upward trend. We've got capacity, capability inside TAFE Institute. So Certificate 4 Cyber is seeing an increase. But if you compare that with currently 25,000 skills shortage that's existing, and AusCyber is saying that within the next 4 years, there's going to be additional 17,000 jobs that's required. This gap is widening so much. When you actually look at university figures, those figures are not going to be catering for the upward trend that's required. So what we are looking at is encouraging trends, looking at advanced diploma. If you're going to dispute me for the numbers, this has come straight from NCVR. I've taken them 2 days ago, so it's the latest that they've got. For whatever reason, without really dwelling into the numbers, we can see upward trends, but this needs to be very steep and going upwards. And it will be really good to see what TAFEs are doing with the new skill sets and with the new specializations that's in the training package, qualifications as well. So what we're trying to do is to really harness this strength of TAFE and come up with a model that actually accelerates that. That's the whole idea of the Canberra Cyber Hub. The first thing when PK was bringing it to our attention, I said, we need to go to CIT. So I personally visited CIT, met Fiona and a number of people in CIT, and we talked about the digital skill development model or cyber skill development model that we are going to really lead with CIT, or CIT leading. It was very pleasing with when TAFE wanted to partner, so they'll be coming in as an observer to scale it as well. So it's about how do we get this, how do we harness this capacity, capability, the great skills in TAFE institutes all over Australia, and then how do we actually connect that with what the employers require very quickly, so we could deliver it with the volume that's required and the velocity that's required as well. So I'm going to stop there and come back to the Canberra Cyber Hub in another slide there as well. I'll hand over to you, PK.
I'm on mute there. So I think that, the so what of all of that is that if we're going to get after those numbers, we need to do things differently. So we have to be able to generate training quickly. We need to be talking in terms of months, not years, and we need to be really focused upon the outcomes that we're trying to get to. Now, some of you will have seen this before, and I'll very quickly sort of talk to it. So the way that we try to unpack that, and this is the macro idea here. So it's sort of like the cyber work that we're doing is if you like, is an application of the approach that we're now effectively evaluating and trialing. And we talk about effectively the importance of a skills-based approach, the recognition of the fact that people acquire skills that they can then apply across a range of jobs, across a range of industries. So we're trying to move and shift away from these very defined job roles, and to recognize that in the digital space, these things enable you to do things in many different types of roles. And that you're taking these skills with you for life, as opposed to necessarily something that is very specific about a job. Some jobs require that, other jobs don't. In the cyberspace and in the digital space, we're very much focused around the idea of those skills and what the skills are. We're also trying to simplify the language that enables people to understand what digital skills look like and how they're applied and used. And we do that through what we call a number of digital skills pathways. If you think of a doctor or an accountant, a doctor has got a bunch of specializations that we all understand well. And it's generally the hallmark of any sort of relatively mature profession. But in the digital space, we don't have that language that helps us to sort of align on sort of what are we talking about, what are the options for an individual, and how do they then find their way through that. And that impacts then employers who don't understand what they should be asking for in terms of people and the skills that they want in their workforce. And it impacts learners who can't find their way into the profession because they think the profession doesn't relate to them. So we want to try and address that through what we call digital career skills pathways, which are a simple way of describing what those opportunities might be. Sat within the pathways are a bunch of skills, a library of skills, if you like, that can be wrapped and stacked in different ways. But at the outside dimension of it, we try to be clear about sort of what those digital career pathways look like, so that a learner can say, I want to be one of them. And a learner and an employer can say, I want to have one of them. And therefore we can connect them up. Cyber is like a no-brainer. It's like super simple and it's well understood. But the idea of actually having a cyber pathway is in itself quite novel and quite different. The skills that sit within that pathway can be picked up and applied in different ways across other pathways. But let's start somewhere, which enables us to sort of bring together employers who want people in their workforce with a certain skill set, a certain sort of set of qualifications, and let's try to open up those pathways and describe them in a way that will be appealing to the non-traditional tech workers. So we're making our digital skill options for people as accessible as possible. When we think about that sort of shift and change into the pathways, we're agnostic of where people come from. So it's not about whether or not you scored a certain score in your ATAR, your year 12 exams. It's not about whether or not you went to university or vet. It's fundamentally about recognizing that everybody has a part to play and everybody is able to find their way through it. It's just about what approach you have to learning and how you learn. We make a distinction between literacy, which is basic digital skills to enable somebody to interact in the workplace, fluency, which is an enhanced level of that, so that you're applying that, you're learning it, and you're being able to do more with it. So then the idea of the professional, the digital professional, the person who's employed as a cyber guy or a software developer or a product manager. The next element that goes with the pathways is this idea of a standard. And the standard is a mechanism that we use to surface what the employers want to see in the workplace. Currently, we have challenges with completion rates, but we also have challenges with employment rates. People will finish courses, but they won't get a job. And that's because the employers aren't seeing the courses delivering to them people with the skills that they need. When those individuals are given a job, they then have to be retrained within the organization. So we're trying through the standards to find a simple, easy way of surfacing what does the employer actually want to see in the workforce at a certain level. The standard is made up of a set of skills defined by proficiency. But the essence of it is that it doesn't replace a training package, but it provides a guide against which a training package can be assessed and evaluated so that the training provider, you guys, are able to be clear about what success looks like from an employer's perspective, and you can then do the design of the course to meet those criteria. And particularly in the digital space, we know because of the pace of change that often a course will need to blend accredited forms of training and non-accredited forms of training, and that's okay. But the standard is a mechanism that helps to provide clarity to providers, training providers, to learners, to employers about what they want to see in the workplace, and therefore give you a view as to what success looks like. When you have a standard, you can assess yourself against the standard. So imagine a world whereby we could actually measure digital literacy, and you can quantify how literate your workforce is, so you can then work out what interventions you need. Same applies with cyber. You know, if you look at the numbers of different courses that are out there, how can you help to give confidence to the government about whether or not we're closing the cyber security gap, the cyber skills security gap? You know, a standard helps you to have a view of what standard you're trying to get to and whether or not you're achieving it. The third component of the model is what we call centers of excellence. This is a highly controversial term. It will shift and it will adjust, but really what it tries to do is to recognize that we need to be working with training providers to find the most effective ways of delivering a skills-based approach. So I don't want anyone to get transfixed by that centers of excellence piece. It's a term that I made up one weekend. No one's ever liked it, but it is an attempt to try and recognize that we need to have that conversation. That's very much some of the work that we're now doing with TAFE directors in terms of putting together a community of this community to help us really sort of get into co-design to work out how we can better deliver this type of training. So that's very much the approach. I'm going to hand back across to Gathani, who can now, I think, make the linkage now into the really exciting project, which is the Canberra Cyber Hub.
Thank you, PK. So very quickly looking at that, ACT Government, Canberra Cyber Hub and DSO partnered to look at the really looking at an innovative skill development model for the growing Canberra cyber workforce. So, really following on from what PK just outlined, it's about skills, it's about matching those skills, learning pathways into the career pathways that are available in Canberra. So that's the whole idea of the Canberra Cyber Hub. Now, there are a number of providers that are working in this ecosystem, and it's about getting the best, getting the leaders and actually harnessing that. So we did a lot of analysis of job descriptions and things for jobs in Canberra. Most of them, 99.9 says of somebody with a degree qualification who's able to have these industry certifications and things like them. We also we surveyed employers and got their views, got their perception about what TAFE delivers and what BET delivers and what private providers and universities deliver. And we actually thought, well, it's time for us to get all these players together. And we really want to create this framework. What are the building blocks that we can use to set a learner in the pathway to success in a cyber career? Exactly, and once they complete, they can go into that particular career. Doesn't have to be 2-year, 3-year, 4-year degrees, doesn't have to be dependent on time. Exact skill set that's required in a systematic manner to get them onto the ramp to get into that cyber career as well. So on ramp to the cyber careers is what we're looking at. So we've actually working with a number of specialists in the area. What we're looking at is to bring everyone together to create a micro-credentials based cybersecurity learning pathways, creating on-ramp to cyber careers. So leading that with us, as BET provided Canberra Institute of Technology, that idea of Center of Excellence. We work with one, we're bringing TAFE into it, and there's going to be a lot of collaboration between TAFE and Fiona, CIT. We've connected made that connection. And with that, we've got a number of universities, platform providers like Fifth Domain that's already working with so many TAFE institutes across Australia and particularly with CIT. And then there are other training providers like Australian Fraud and Anti-Corruption Academy, Intelligence and Training Academy, Tessanet Academy, and all of them together. We're going to create a micro-credentialing framework. We're going to codify that. We're going to really publish that, and hopefully we'll take it to Tasmania and to everybody else as well. Fiona and DSO, CIT, DSO partnership will actually establish that, and with the support from TAFE as well. I'm going to stop there and just go to the next slide.
Giussani, we do need to finish up in a minute or two if possible.
Yeah, that's the last slide.
Great, thank you.
PK, did you want to do this slide?
No, all good. I mean, I think it's keen for you to be involved, and obviously looking forward to progressing this. So just let us know if this is something that you guys want to learn more about.
Send me an email or send an email to that thing, or Fiona. We will work with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Giussani. That was a really interesting presentation, and really great to just set the scene about the state of affairs of cyber and digital skills in Australia. Some really interesting statistics there, Patrick. So thanks for sharing those. So I'd like to move on to our next speaker now, which is Fiona Mitchell. Fiona is the Director of Industry Engagement at CIT. So over to you, Fiona.
Yuma, everyone. Good afternoon. It's great to join you all here today. I would like to acknowledge that today I'm presenting from the land of the Ngunnawal people and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are joining us today. I just wanted to check that everyone can see my screen. No. Please bear with me just for one moment.
That's all right, Fiona. Just take your time.
Thank you.
There we go.
Okay. Everyone should be able to see the screen now, I hope.
You might just want to change the display settings and flip it around so it'll go to full screen. Just in the top left-hand corner, where it's got display settings, just change that one to presenter mode.
I'm on a different screen. Just one moment, sorry.
Fiona, would you like me to do the sharing for you?
That would be lovely, thank you. It's just coming off the second screen. I do apologise.
All good. Okay. Oh, is this looking good?
That is looking brilliant. Thank you so much, Melissa, today. Much appreciated. Okay, so let's get going. So firstly, just to set some context for you, if we could move on to the next slide, please, Melinda. This collaborative model really aligns to CIT's strategic compass and CIT's Futures 2025 and its strategic pillars. And those strategic pillars are certainly about leading change and really raising our ambitions to meet new expectations. We're adapting our courses to meet the needs of delivery and provide skills for the future. And we're growing our region's economy. So we're supporting the local jobs and the economic resilience and really ensuring that we've got a key role in the prosperity of the region. We're also looking to transform our business, and in that we're investing in our business for viability and value. So at CIT, we are embracing a future that's rich with possibilities and a future where we're at the centre of a vibrant and constantly adapting ecosystem of students, businesses and community. And we are an integral part of the ACT community, and as the public provider of vocational education and training, we're really in a unique position to contribute to the prosperity and sustainability of Canberra, but also more broadly, particularly in the sphere of cybersecurity. If we could move to the next slide, please, Melissa. So here I am today to provide you with a perspective of the Canberra Cyber Hub. And certainly one of the key observations is that CIT has had a critical role in leading the change. So we've led an initiative to work collaborative with TAFE throughout the country, as Gaetani has suggested. And then we've endorsed, that's all been endorsed by AusCyber. And we actually formalised the commitment through an MOU in 2017. So the work really started for us and the conversation started for us in 2016. And then, of course, they evolved in exploring different landscapes and getting different inputs from the TAFEs across Australia. This collaboration in particular has demonstrated the commitment to the sector by further collaborating with TAFEs across Australia and also sharing the resources and the knowledge and broadening the networks and the conversations. And of course, that includes government, education, research organisations and the likes. The other components are the activation of the ACT government priorities. So CIT is really uniquely positioned, and as this initial work commenced, our work and conversations with the ACT government really positioned the exploration in the development of a connected education ecosystem. And a design workshop really recognised that the ACT was the unique connector to higher education, CIT, and of course our industry partners and employers. And I guess that was really pivotal because that gave us the seat at the table, not only with government, but certainly with industry to really forge this work forward. With regard to resourcing, the work we used, as Gaetani sort of suggested, was the Victorian model in the Cert 4 in cyber. And that was really the launch pad for the development of our Training Security Operations Centre. And that was co-funded by an AusCyber grant. and of course the ACT government in partnership with Fifth Domain. So again, really critical that that collaboration and those conversations started early, and they were built on in a consistent and trusted manner. So we did also really acknowledge how we've been able to celebrate the true value, and something that we're all passionate about, of VET and TAFE. The project really revived the fact that, and demonstrated that TAFE can innovate, and that TAFE can be agile. And I guess fundamentally that TAFE and the VET model is the right one to develop those skills that we need within the current and obviously emerging cyber workforce, noting that it is so fast-paced. And I guess the other part that really was a learning for us was how we don't underestimate the relevance of this project on the national and international scale. The stage that we've been given and the platform we've been given to showcase our work has been extraordinary. So the partnerships between industry, vocational education and higher education have created their own ecosystems, and they're in turn developed skills and pathways for jobs. We've had interest from Singapore VET providers. We've certainly had really great interest from federal government agencies in our project work to date. We've also had a really great opportunity to provide a platform to forge and strengthen pathways between TAFE and university. But we also acknowledge that each of us have a distinct and very different complementary value proposition to pose to such projects. And this is a model that can be replicated, you know, with the work that we continue to do through the Canberra Cyber Hub. And of course, building the cybersecurity workforce capability is critical. And the key link to that has been having the conversations and working with our industry partners to demonstrate how we can build that future-ready workforce, and also to build and access a talent pool, which, as Patrick has said, it remains challenging. Next slide, please. I've included this infographic today just to illustrate the cybersecurity education ecosystem in the ACT and the complexity of the environment in which we're working. And of course, this particular mapping exercise, and it really gives us great visibility as to all the working components of the project and the interconnectivity and the true scale of the project. It's always a good reference point for us and a bit of an anchor to do that reflective work in progressing and contributing to the project. Next slide, please. Obviously, within that ecosystem and breaking down certain components of that map, CIT plays a pivotal role in partnering with the ACT Education Directorate, the Catholic and independent schools to provide tasters in cybersecurity, and eligible students have access to a whole raft of taster programs, but certainly the CIT Job Trainer program, which is funded by federal government and the ACT government, has certainly seen some uptake, and that's been really, really encouraging. We're also currently exploring some Australian school-based apprenticeships in cyber. And again, that's in partnership with the ACT Education Training Directorate. And that true intent is to increase participation and, of course, awareness and a pipeline of employers and further studies into this particular field if that's what they would like to pursue. Again, with universities, we are exploring higher apprenticeships in cyber. So looking at those traditional articulation pathways, but also looking at those reverse pathways, which are just as valuable. And certainly we're working with ANU, University of New South Wales and University of Canberra in those particular forums. As we mentioned before, we've got a really strong connection to government, and CIT is proud of its ICT's traineeships and the work integrated models that we've adopted. And some of the examples of the agencies that we have sort of collaborated with would be government departments such as Department of Defence, Department of Finance, the ATO, the AFP, DHS, the ACT government and CSIRO, and then we've also had a really successful long-term partnership with DTA, and they're providing an ACT apprenticeship program for federal government. So we're doing the training and assessment in that space, again, to upskill and provide jobs and workers. Next slide, please. So we're all familiar with these terms in the TAFE sector. Again, accredited training for industry, we're providing that to community and government to meet current and emerging workforce skill development. And as Gaetani said, that is truly a co-design model. We're making sure that the skills that are adopted and the outcomes of that training are fit for purpose. We're offering customised training, so CIT connects with industry again to identify and provide professional development opportunities. So as Patrick alluded to before, they're not often they're not accredited programs. Sometimes there's a blend between skill sets and non-accredited training. You know, some people might start in job trainer and then progress on to other courses. And my team as CIT industry engagement certainly are at the forefront in exploring, you know, employers and industry needs in that space. Skills recognition is a customer-centric, cost-effective process that we've put in place to support employers. And in supporting employers, we're helping them to maximise their business potential and certainly to support their individuals in ensuring that, they are progressing in their aspirations and building their skills in cyber security. Next slide, please. So this is just a little snapshot, and this shows the enrolments for first semester of this year. And I thought it was just a nice one to see that our numbers are steadily growing, and we are expecting additional enrolments in the this particular semester. So again, we're seeing some growth there. Completions are something that are in progress, and again, I'm sure we'll discuss those as a broader group shortly. Next slide, please. So as far as the teaching resources are concerned, in November 2018, as a national first as part of the collaborative arrangement of this particular project, we came together and provided a training solution to meet the skill shortages in cybersecurity. And we're really proud of the launch. So we called this particular environment the Training Security Operations Centre, and it also has a tech collab space, and that was realised by a $1.1 million investment through a project commitment. And the initial environment includes a virtual classroom. So that's set up with a cloud-based security operations centre, and that simulates real-time data threats. So the teachers get in there and there's all these threats that come into the students. So they're actually getting a really valuable learning experience in the way in which they're provided real scenarios throughout their training. So again, they're really really adaptive to the workforce. Again, the industry collaboration of this project has really ensured that these facilities were fit for purpose, but also, you know, again, that they, we've had so much interest. We've had people come from overseas, we've had people come from local areas, government agencies, really keen to explore and see the students interacting with this space. Next slide, please. So CIT continues to strengthen and broaden the collaboration to build the cybersecurity workforce. So again, we have designed to build linkages that meet ACT workforce requirements. And we are targeting mature age workers to fill the skills gaps in the cyber workforce. We're looking at Australian school-based apprenticeships, and we're collaborating with industry and the ACT Education Directorate and local business, of course. And an example of that is Wallyama to support school leavers to transition into cyber traineeships. We've got the Canberra node, so that's the first operational node in Australia and continues to lead through the commitment to growing the ACT as an exemplar of cybersecurity and collaboration. And then led by the AusCyber with representation from CIT, ANU and University of New South Wales, the node comes together and basically they provide insights and constructive advice and strategies as part of the continuous improvement of the initiative. We've also got a really rich partnership with Microsoft, AusCyber, Prodigy Learning, CIT, TAFE New South Wales, and MEGT is helping us meet the increased need of workers through a cybersecurity starters program. So again, lots of activity happening. These are just a few examples. And CIT IT students obviously participate in a whole raft of hacking competitions for undergraduates and TAFE students for great success. And if we move to the next slide, Melissa, please.
Just to let you know, 2 more minutes if possible.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. I should be well done and dusted by then. Okay, so then if we move on to the next slide, you can now see that these are some of the success stories that we've experienced in the short time of this collaborative project. So we've seen that through those hackathons and events and competitions, our team has really ranked highly with winning some of those awards. We've also had students visit Singapore to look at cyber facilities. There's the opening of the centre and of course the ACT Training Awards for Cyber Industry Collaboration, and that then went on to the 2019 National Training Awards round. Next slide, please. So the ACT and CIT leads this sector in Australia, and we will continue and are committed to continuing the collective work to inform the best practice and leading the TAFE network and supporting and participating TAFEs to create these models further to ensure that we've got the right resources and technology. And of course, we'll continue to share our learnings, as Gatani said again, across the TAFE network and forums such as this one today, and continue to collaborate and grow the sector. And then finally, as Gatani said, feel free to reach out to connect, and we'll certainly get back with you and progress our conversations and work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. There was some really interesting work going on there at CIT. Thank you for sharing that with us, and we look forward to hearing further updates in the future. So I'd like to move to our next speaker now, which is Peter Nicolatatis from Technology One. As I mentioned earlier, Peter is the Industry General Manager for Education at Technology One. So over to you, Peter.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm mindful that we are running a few minutes behind, so I'll try to get through this fairly quickly if I can. Look, first and foremost, we are an education provider with over 500 customers worldwide, but we don't only see ourselves as an education provider of our solutions, but equally as an industry stakeholder. And part of that richness is that with our strong governance model, we leverage and find out lots of things about how those various businesses operate. I've just grabbed a couple of examples of some of the literature that we do look at closely because I think it's quite relevant. On the left-hand side of your screen, of course, is what's EDUCAUSE, which is one of the global leaders in sort of IT-related issues. And as you can see, a lot of the conversations that we've had thus far talks to cyber everywhere, and are we prepared as a community, as a business, and more broadly, as sort of role models to the next cohort of students and young people coming through into their workplaces. And more locally, of course, CORDA, which is the the Council of Australian University Directors of IT. And if you look at sort of the two key findings, both of them highlight the importance of understanding information security. And so one of the observations here is that there is absolutely an increasing need for lifelong learning. However, in a non-linear world, the students now become a consumer, and that's a very much a changed business model in many ways. And of course, when we talk about cyber, quite often what we're really discussing and depicting, of course, is big data. And that's what the scammers and the cyber risks are really looking at. How do we protect that rich data from not falling into the wrong hands? When we start looking at sort of megatrends within the individual, we're quite familiar with the ransomware and those kind of data breaches that occur, phishing and whaling and those types of things. They're fairly common now. And while we're more in tune with those occurrences, we're also mindful, of course, that they're becoming far more sophisticated. And we are seeing things on our mobile phones now. For example, they've gotten very smart to understand that almost everybody uses things like Netflix and PayPal, etc. So you quite often find these invitations to these types of, update your information. And what they're doing, of course, is collecting any piece of information you have. Social is a really interesting concept because if you think about often we refer to students, their accelerated connectedness is through mobile devices, and those mobile devices, the conduits are a lot of the social media type applications. So they're constantly sharing information and perhaps not always realizing that some of that information, when you collate it, you respond to these various surveys on Facebook that ask you, your favorite color, your favorite animal. What they're doing is obviously picking out information that creates a profile about an individual and gives them, a closer rise to where you might be deriving your passwords from. The other thing, of course, is as a vendor, and when you're choosing vendors, I think it's really important to understand what they offer for you in terms of privacy, security, and compliance. Because one of the things that's really evolved over probably the last decade is that we've seen that traditionally the areas of people employed in these areas within various institutions was fairly small, and therefore the focus was largely on education initially. But now we know that there's been a big push and a huge demand for people skilled in these areas. And as my predecessor speakers spoke about, we might have high enrollment, but we still have not equally as high completions and people in those workplaces, so a shortage nonetheless. So it's important that when we think about how much of that we can manage ourselves given our constraints as an organization versus picking and working with the right vendors that can extend that capability and provide those additional peripheral services to help and assist in that way. The other thing, of course, to think about as we sort of move forward is the impact of COVID-19. There's a great adage that says never let a crisis go to waste. And one of the things that we've discussed and learned from this last couple of years is that the teaching and learning environment has changed fundamentally. And then the traditional face-to-face has been really kind of replaced. And while there wasn't, I guess there was always plans that we would be in a hybrid model and we would eventually do more and more on the online space. I guess COVID brought that abruptly about in a very, very short period of time. But what, of course, that does is it changes some of the behavior. So from an anthropological point of view, how a person's behavior changes, whether you're a staff member or student, we know that well-being is quite an important observation here. And the reason why I particularly want to point that out is that when people aren't in a great space, they become a lot more vulnerable. And when you become more vulnerable, you tend to make different types of decisions and not always great decisions. And so if you're largely in the online world, feeling a sense of isolation and your well-being or your mental state's been adversely impacted, then you probably give yourself rise to being a little bit more exposed to risks out there. And where in a traditional face-to-face environment, we have pastoral care that can observe this behavior, it's much more difficult in an online world. So we as an organization, you as a teaching and a learning provider, it's really important that we manage that going forward. I mean, working from home, that's the new normal. And we know that that balance between home and face-to-face is probably skewed more towards working from home now. And that creates a completely different business environment for us to work in. So how do we respond? And what's our observations and recommendations for how education responds? The first thing is an education, and the ones that manage this really well have a very clearly articulated cybersecurity plan. And I know that sounds a fairly obvious thing to say, but you'd be surprised how immature many organizations are in this particular space. The other thing is that most of these organizations, our vendors, our training providers, our education providers, have enormous amounts of systems. Each system contains data, and those systems are pushing data backwards and forwards across the network constantly. Now, in a structured environment, there's a particular risk appetite. In an unstructured environment, we store lots of data in cloud type services or online services. What we have is basically a lot of information moving around. And there's a really interesting sort of piece of research we've done recently that talks about the economic impact of software as a service. And what it draws out, and it was an independent piece of research done by IBRS available to download, and I welcome everyone to go and look at that. Talks about that the shift to SaaS, besides not only extending the capability of that area of protection that most organizations are seeking, but it also potentially has a savings of in the order of $250 billion for the Australian marketplace, not just in education, of course, but right across all the verticals. So I think, I strongly encourage you to have a read of that, because we know that this is a direction for most organizations, and those that have adapted this early are starting to see the benefits. But as a country, in its holistic way, investing in SaaS has benefits right across the board. Educating students and staff is an ongoing opportunity. That's not something you do once and you let it go. This has to be continuously invested in. And we know things like multi-factor authentication and these types of technologies are actually out there at the moment. And that's part of what we do as a vendor provider, is making sure that the way we construct and configure the solutions that we provide, that we meet all those expectations, those that are audited by third parties, to ensure that your organization is compliant at all times. The other kind of thing, and this is from my lessons learned as a CIO over 15 years across 5 universities, was, and I mentioned this earlier, never let a crisis go to waste. Having a plan and practicing that plan is really important, because nothing beats having an exercise to try out how well you can respond to an incident. Quite often we have these well laid out plans, but never actually exercise to see what would happen in the event of something not going correctly. And we don't have a choice here, colleagues. We're all in this new normal, and how we work smartly and collaboratively, I think, built a better outcome for not only the students and the workforce, but our communities at large. So I apologize for rushing that a little bit, but I'm mindful that we were running a bit behind time. Lyndall, I'll hand it back to you.
That was great, Peter. Thank you very much. And some really interesting insights there as well from Technology One. So just, I think we did have a question in the chat, so we do have a few minutes to address that. I'll read it out. So Jennifer Fleischer is interested to know if the cyber skill sets in the ICT and the BSB, the business training packages, are actually being used to meet industry needs. So I don't know whether, Fiona, you have a reflection on that, or anyone at the DSO. A reflection on the skill sets in the ICT and the BSB training packages?
I can start. What are we, it's what are they used to meet industry needs? And the project with the Canberra Cyber Hub that we're doing is doing exactly that, to really make the industry aware of these things and how we can leverage from them moving forward. So we are mapping all of these things into the pathways, and hopefully that will actually raise the profile of them and really connect what we are doing with the employers. Over to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Gathani. Hi, Jen, how are you? Certainly, as far as CIT is concerned, we are looking at those training package updates and those particular units relating to cyber across multiple industries and their application to multiple industries. So yes, again, we are using them and we'll continue to explore those. Job Trainer was another example how we pulled out some of those individual competencies or unaccredited sort of opportunities for those particular programs.
Thanks, Fiona. Jenny Dodd, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Lyndall, and thank you to everybody who spoke today. Fantastic presentations. I'm going to direct my question firstly to Peter, but I'd be interested in response from Patrick, Gathani and Fiona as well, because it's part of the ecosystem. Peter, thank you very much for your insights into the importance of how we as organisations also manage our own cyber risk. That was fantastic. As an employer who is technology-based, what advice do you give to providers and also to DSO, who's part of that ecosystem of developing capability, about how are we going to attract more people into developing the deep sets of skills that you need for your workforce that have a spin-off? And it was particularly pleasing to see that data that Fiona gave, that that showed how the enrolments are growing. That was great. But interested in the employer perspective, and then I guess across to DSO and to CIT onto how are you attracting students into these courses. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, and thanks for that question. We've got a very strong graduate employability program, and one of the things that, and certainly I've observed not only as my role in Tech One, but also previously as working in education, is that nothing beats work integrated learning experiences. So it's when you collaborate with the learnings in the course, but then you apply them in a real workplace, and we do that quite extensively with many of our customers. We do it through scholarships, we do it through opportunities, we do it through hackathons, etc. And I think, you know, the one observation is attracting, and attracting is a really important part of the ecosystem. And you know, the real part is that how do you encourage somebody to see a course right out through the end with the belief that they'll get employed in that discipline that they've been studying in, but also along the way they've got to have those integrated learning experiences with real employers, because that's what differentiates them in the marketplace when they seek those opportunities. So I think those things are really important.
Thank you. Others, any perspectives that you might like to add? And again, thank you all for your presentation.
I'll quickly start and give to PK just to say that, sorry, PK, just to say that their work integrated learning, one of the outcomes of the Canberra Cyber Hub project is to really bring that training room closer to the classroom rather than having workplace experience as separate to classroom experience, to link them and bringing them closer for deeper skills. Over to you, PK.
Absolutely sort of endorse all of that stuff in terms of, you know, how do we give great training experiences so people complete these courses and they see the value of them and the worth of them. And there's a bit of work to be done there so that qualifications themselves are recognised and valued. And I think there's something in there around making sure that we have a flexible system that recognises that people learn in different ways using micro-credentials, and yet every time somebody learns, that should be recognised and that should be credited to my view. And you would just have to think differently about what a qualification looks like. But I think, you know, with this particular conundrum, it's like, how are we going to open up the pipeline to people who never would have thought about these types of careers before? And so that's about straight, simple communication and marketing. You know, we need to be talking about what the opportunities are in these jobs, making them normal, making it feel normal so that we're attracting individuals to come in. We've done a great piece of work with an organisation called Year 13, 17 to 24-year-olds, 1.5 million of them on their database. And it's all about trying to nudge through the narrative their interest, and the results are staggering in terms of, if we focus upon trying to communicate the benefits and the interest and why digital skills are important and good fun, you can literally, I think we nudged the numbers up from people who were not thinking about a digital career. From originally it was like only 17% were thinking about it, to numbers in excess of 40%. So just by being targeted and focused in terms of what we're saying and how we're saying it, we can shift people's perceptions, and that then opens up the pipeline of talent. That connected with simple ways of engaging, simple ways of finding their ways onto skilling programs, funding that makes it easy for people to do things. You know, it's all part and parcel of trying to make it easy for people to adopt these types of this type of training.
And Jenny, certainly from CIT's perspective, we've had some really good models working in the ACT education space in that ASBA or TASTER program, where the work integrated learning is a significant component. As students move towards the completion of their qualifications, we actually get industry and employers in or go out and visit them. And it's a chance for them to meet the individuals and see if the fit is right. And the energy is right, and then they tend to, you know, move into those environments and be highly successful, and the retention rates seem to be much better in those sort of examples.
Thanks, Fiona, and thanks everyone. I'd really like to just thank all of our speakers today. Peter, Fiona, Patrick and Githani, thank you for your time and for sharing your insights and expertise. It was a really interesting discussion. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to welcoming you back to future events. Thanks, everyone.